Let me tell you about the 5 books that completely changed my life. And by this, I don't mean books that taught me the most or books that I've enjoyed the most. My life was following a certain path, and those books went like ping, and it veered off completely. I actually don't have those 5 books, I just put those here to look good. The first of those 5 books is Of Mice and Men, and I know this book has been banned in some countries, silly you, but it is actually amazing and it completely opened up a world to me. So I was in the last year of primary school, so about 10 years old, and we in the class had to read the first few chapters. I think all of us had the book, but the teacher only asked us to read the first 3 chapters, I think. Obviously, this was in French, but that was the first classic that I read. Before that, I used to read a lot of comics and, books for kids, a lot of historical magazines and all of this, but that's the first classic that I read, and it was amazing because this is the first book that I could see. So while reading this book, I would see it happening. And even though I wasn't asked to read all of it, I read the book from cover to cover. And I especially remember a moment when the foreman enters the room to greet the 2 main characters. And I was reading this without any conscious thought. I could say I read this book, but I was actually visualizing the scene of this guy entering the room, and I came out of this book like, whoa! I couldn't believe how amazing it was to read a book. I mean, I loved reading books already, but that put my love on a new level. So, Of Mice and Men was the first of the 5 books that changed my life, and yeah, I think everyone should read it, or a book of this caliber at least once in their childhood, early teenagerhood. The second book in this list is The Green Mile, and I need to give a bit of context here too. So now I was probably 13 or 14, so second half of junior high school, and for the first trimester of that year, we were supposed to study fantasy. So we studied fantasy, and the teacher, my French teacher, amazing guy, I loved studying with this teacher. So on the first class, he asked us to fill a paper and to tell him what was our favorite book and our favorite movie. I had just watched The Green Mile with Tom Hanks, and I love this movie. It was really fresh at that moment, but even then I knew that's a movie I would love for the rest of my life, and it's still the only movie that made me cry to this day. So The Green Mile, I love that movie, and I put it in this document that the teacher asked of us. And he's like, oh, good, you like The Green Mile. Did you read the book? I didn't even know there was a book about The Green Mile. I didn't know it started as a book. And this teacher also loved all the Stephen Kings. He was a big Stephen King's fan. So next class, he lent me The Green Mile, and I read this book, and it was so amazing to read a book that was the same as the movie I just watched, because the movie helped me visualize the book even more. But then I got so much more in the book compared to the movie, because you go into more details about each character. The Green Mile taught me how much better books were compared to movies, even if the movie is amazing. This is no criticism of The Green Mile, I still love it. Third book of this list, and this one will not surprise people who've been following me. I think I was 17 or 16 maybe. I read The Romance of the 3 Kingdoms. And that one changed my life completely. So, The Romance of the 3 Kingdoms is one of the 4 Chinese great classics. It's the first one of them that I read, and I read it following my discovery of the video game Dynasty Warriors. Right. At that point, I already knew quite a bit about Japanese culture. I knew that I loved everything that came from East Asia, and I knew a bit about China, but it completely opened the door to the Chinese culture, and it made me realize how much I love Chinese culture. So I read this book, then I read another, and I kept reading and watching stuff about China. I went to live there for a little over 2 years, and The 3 Kingdoms to this day, so 20 years later, is still one of my greatest passions, to the point that I wrote 5 books. Well, I really wrote 6, but I published 5 already books on the 3 Kingdoms of China. So The Romance of the 3 Kingdoms by Luo Guanzhong is one of the books, of the 5 books that impacted my life the most. I would say it's one of the top 2 in this list. Number 4, and now I'm 19, I believe, or 20 maybe. 20, I was in second year of my bachelor degree in English literature. Now the first year, we studied, Shakespeare and Dr. Faustus and all those more medieval texts, like even Beowulf and all of this. And those books are really difficult. They were really difficult for me to read without some kind of a bilingual edition. Even then, those are not easy texts. Then second year, so we start studying writers from 20th century, writers like James Joyce or Fitzgerald or Hemingway. And we had a list of books recommended to us by our teachers. And I went straight for Hemingway because I'm a bit of a history geek and I knew of his impact on the liberation of Paris at the end of the Second World War. So, I went towards Hemingway quite naturally and I grabbed a copy of The Old Man and the Sea. And you know what? I really like this book. It's such a great book. But more than anything, it's the first book that I could read in my life completely in English without any help beside a few words here and there. So this book allowed me to read more in English because I could read The Old Man and the Sea. Then I started reading almost exclusively in English. Since then, I haven't read many books in French. Then following, Hemingway, I started reading anything I could get my hands on, especially if it was in the historical fiction genre, which I discovered was my favorite genre. And that leads me to the last of those 5 books. So at that point, I was about 30 years old, so that was like 7 years ago. And I had read, especially in the last 2 years, I had read all the Bernard Cornwell I could get my hands on, all the Connie Goulden, Ben Kane, Harry Sadbottom, and so on, all the Giles Christians as well. And I hated my job. I had a desk job and I hated every minute of it. But I was living my life through those books. I was enjoying life through those books of historical fiction. Then I bought Lancelot, so by Giles Christian, and that's the 5th book in this video. So Lancelot by Giles Christian, and it's not a review of this book. I have done a review of that book a few years ago, not too long after I read it, and this story is amazing. It's still one of my top 10 favorite books ever. But more than that, I think that's the book that told me I had enough. So I had filled my brain with all those novels of historical fiction, and it led me to believe maybe I could do it. That would be great if I was a writer, if I shared my stories. And then I read Lancelot, and I would take it with me to the office, and I would sneak in a few pages here and there between phone calls, between meetings. And then it went to the point when I basically booked meeting rooms just so that I could spend 20-30 minutes reading Lancelot in peace. And while I loved reading that book, it also bottled up frustration for not being a writer. And there was a moment, probably toward the end of the book, I was like, I cracked. That was it. I had enough of not being a writer. I discovered that I was a writer and nothing else would do but to write stories and give this kind of feelings I was having to other people. So that's the book that taught me that I was a writer and not whatever I was doing at my job. That wasn't it. I hated it, but writing was the thing I was born for. So Lancelot helped me to discover my purpose in life. So that's why I think this one plus The Romance of the Three Kingdoms are the 2 books that changed my life the most. And then following Lancelot, I started writing. So that was 2018 back then. And I started writing, and now I have published 11 books, including those 2 here. And I owe it to Giles Christian and all those authors I mentioned today. So those are my 5 life-changing books. Most of them are still among my favorite books as well, but here they are, the books that explain the kind of person I became. And I'm really curious, please let me know if you had these moments in your life where a book changed its course. So please let me know in the comments what would be those books and how they impacted you. Thank you very much for watching this video. Make sure to follow this account to know more about the books that I read, the books that I write, Chinese history and Japanese folklore. See you very soon. Cheers.